Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I am back with The Search for Tyranny. We are once again diving into the Heritage Project's Project 2025, the Mandate for Leadership, and we are looking to see exactly where tyranny might lie. There have been some concerning things in this, but nothing I would consider tyrannical. So far, so good. There has been a lot of get to know how the government works, and I actually appreciate most of that to see the interaction between these agencies and to see how all that works. But now we're starting something different. This is a new section. We're going to be talking about the Department of Agriculture today. I may or may not have things to add. I haven't read this ahead of time. We are reading this together. I am reading it aloud to you. You're listening to it, but I'm reading it for the first time right now. And so the thoughts that I have as we go along will be my original thoughts, right? This is, I do have a good bit of understanding of the things involved in the Department of Agriculture, if not many of the other departments, because I grew up surrounded by cows, right? I lived in the country and the hood as a child, but a large part of it was out in the country, and I was hanging out in the urban areas. So, like, I know cows and chickens and pigs and all of those things. I took ag in high school. I know how to grade meat. I can butcher any animal that you want. There's a lot of things that I can do that are related to this. So, I do have a little bit of understanding of it. That being said, I am not a farmer, so I don't have a great understanding. I have my little home piece that I have trees planted on, but it is a small lot in a residential neighborhood. It is not a commercial venture. Therefore, I am not an expert. This is just us as citizens exploring to see if we can find some tyranny, because people keep telling me that this is going to cause the end of the world, that this is the manifestation of the Nazi Party, and I want to see exactly where that pops out. So we're going through it page by page and line by line. We are reading the entirety of the thing into the record. We may be done before Election Day. Let's dive in and see what's up with the Department of Agriculture. Y'all excuse my glasses. I had to borrow my wife's because I lost mine today while running errands. The Department of Agriculture by Darren Basked. I do not have nearly enough water to do this. All right. American farmers efficiently and safely produce food to meet the needs of individuals around the globe. Because of the innovation and resilience of the nation's farmers, American agriculture is a model for the world. If farmers are allowed to operate without unnecessary government intervention, American agriculture will continue to flourish, producing plentiful, safe, nutritious, and affordable food. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, can and should play a limited role, with much of its focus on removing governmental barriers that hinder food production or otherwise undermine efforts to meet consumer demand. The USDA should recognize what should be self-evident. Agricultural production should first and foremost be focused on efficiently producing safe food. This chapter provides important background on the USDA and identifies many of the USDA specific issues that will be faced by an incoming administration. It provides specific recommendations for the next administration about how to address these issues and lays out a conservative vision for what the USDA should look like in the future. All right, if y'all don't know, this part of this is vocal therapy, so my voice wavers. It is what it is. Mission statement. The current mission statement, as stated by the Biden administration, highlights the broad scope of the USDA. I'm trying to hit that middle ground in between there, and I just can't seem to get it. To serve all Americans by providing effective, innovative, science-based public policy leadership in agriculture, food and nutrition, natural resource protection and management, rural development, and related issues, with a commitment to delivering equitable and climate-smart opportunities that inspire and help America thrive. The first part of the mission statement regarding the issues covered is not new to the Biden administration. It reflects the overly broad nature of the USDA's work. However, the language bringing in equity and climate change is new to the Biden administration and part of the USDA's express effort to transform agricultural production. The USDA's new vision statement eliminates the focus of this effort. an equitable and climate-smart food and agriculture economy that protects and improves the health, nutrition, and quality of life of all Americans, yields healthy land, forest, and clean water, helps rural America thrive, and feeds the world. This effort is one of a federal central plan to put climate change and environmental issues ahead of the most important requirements of agriculture to efficiently produce safe food. The USDA would apparently use its power to change the very nature of the food and agriculture economy into one that is equitable and climate smart. As an initial matter, the USDA should not try to control and shape the economy, but should instead remove obstacles that hinder food production. Further, it should not place ancillary issues such as environmental issues ahead of agricultural production itself. A proper mission statement. Even before the Biden administration's radical effort to reshape the USDA's work, the USDA's mission was and is too broad, including serving as a major welfare agency through implementation of programs such as food stamps. The far-reaching mission is not the fault of the USDA, but of Congress, which has given the department its extensive power. Congress must limit the USDA's role. A proper mission would clarify that the department's primary focus is on agriculture, and the USDA serves all Americans. The USDA's client is the American people in general, not a subset of interests such as farmers, meat packers, environmental groups, etc. Within this agricultural focus, the USDA should develop and disseminate information and research. The historical role of the USDA, identify and address concrete threats to public health and safety arising from food and agriculture. Remove unjustified foreign trade barriers, blocking market access for American agricultural goods, and generally remove government barriers that undermine access to safe and affordable food across the food supply chain. Core principles should be included within any mission statement, including a recognition that farmers and the food system in general should be free from unnecessary government intervention. Further, there should be clear statements about the importance of sound science to inform the USDA's work and respect for personal freedom and individual dietary choices, private property rights, and the rule of law. Taking these factors into account, below is a model USDA mission statement. To develop and disseminate agricultural information and research, identify and address concrete public health and safety threats directly connected to foods and agriculture, and remove both unjustified foreign trade barriers for U.S. goods and domestic government barriers that undermine access to safe and affordable food absent a compelling need, all based on the importance of sound science, personal freedom, private property, the rule of law, and service to all Americans. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take the break here, right? The USDA is one of those that have been affected by the Chevron verdict, right? The Chevron deference overturning will absolutely, without a doubt, affect the USDA. There are lots of regulations that have been taken and enforced as laws that have driven a lot of small companies, small farms, small families slap out of business. They cannot afford to keep up. They cannot afford the regulations and restrictions being continuously, onerously burdened upon them. I know many people who have gone out of farming because they could not keep up with the regulations. Not because their product was bad, not because they were trying to be shady and doing unjust things, not because they were practicing anything unsafe, but because they could not afford to keep up with the regulations. The market wouldn't bear it. I know many farmers who get paid not to grow anything. That is also under the purview of the USDA and the FDA combined. I think they co-hit that, but that is severely limiting a vast number of very important things, not the least of which is world food stability. We here in this country can produce enough food to feed the world. That is not a question. It is not a maybe. That is a truth. That is absolutely possible. A great deal of that is due to the overbearing chemical fertilization programs that we have. And while I said I was not an expert, I am pretty well informed on this particular subject. I am very much interested in rehabilitative organics and the way that things can be done. And I do believe this the wave of the future in probably 20 years you will see pretty much everywhere is smaller scales, less monoculture. Oh, simply because we will absolutely find out that the chemical fertilization treatments that we are doing is really not good for us. There is a reason why we have the fattest people on the planet. It's not because they're eating healthily. It is because they are eating too many things with too many things added. The the reason I went ahead and took the break here is because it was talking about the foreign markets. Well, there is a very, very good reason why we do not get to sell a lot of our things in the foreign market. It's because it's unhealthy. It's unhealthy. Things that are on our shelves are unhealthy, and I don't really like to get too much into the names because then it opens you up to legal issues. But there are snack cakes that are nothing but fluff. They have no dietary value. They taste so good. And I get that. As a treat every once in a while, that's a wonderful thing. Eating a box of them, terrible, right? Or cereals. Like you can go, and I'm doing this right now, right? We have a local Associated Grocer. I don't know what y'all have where y'all are, but that is the small scale groceries around here are Associated Grocers, so that they can compete with the market heavy the Walmarts and Rouses and stuff around here are larger, and they bid their own deals, and the Associated Grocers go and they together and try to counteract that a little bit. So I shop local. This store, the Associated Grocer, is a local store. They have started with their own variety of cereal, right? Very basic. But if you put them side by side, the name brand and the Associated Grocers one, there is a stark difference between the two. And it is one of the reasons why I am more than willing to shop local. The local generic brand of bran with raisins that are crunchy has just the ingredients that are absolutely necessary to get you there. Whereas the name brand version of that has a list of things that it's really hard to pronounce without a chemistry degree. That is a significant difference for me. I cook, right? I'm a disabled person. I am the homemaker. So I cook. I cook from scratch almost every day. We very rarely eat out. We very rarely partake of things that are made outside of me making them. And so it's important to me that I have the option of that, right? I think that is the direction we're going to wind up going. I think that this monoculture farming was great for population expansion, but I'm not so sure that it is going to be good for population maintaining. That's not to say that we will ever get rid of chemical fertilizers altogether, but the way that we just destroy, like literally destroy the life in hundreds of thousands of acres here in this state alone every single year. If you drive between seasons, right, there's no grass that grows in these fields down here. Like they go through and they harvest the soybeans or they harvest the corn or whatever the monoculture is for this area, and it rotates. Like it'll be corn now and it'll be soybeans again, and like all kinds of stuff. There's stuff they rotate through, but in between the plantings, there's no life. There's no grass that grows in the fields, right? You're sitting for months, late fall, but it's still fall. Like we still have things grow here in Louisiana in the winter time. Come spring, there's no green. There's no birds. There's no rats. There's no moles. There's no worms in the dirt. We're killing it, right? That is destroying the ability of the ground to be able to be bountiful. We are taking all the organics completely out, and we call it good because we burn off the field and then we plow it under and we let it sit for a couple of months. No, that is unsustainable, and we are going to find that out. Like, I'm not an expert, I'm not some scientist, but it does not take a scientist to figure that out. The USDA has been pushing us towards that. They have not indeed been regulating the good things that we need, right? They haven't been making sure that we're not getting, or that we are getting clearly labeled bioengineered products. There are a lot of things that you can buy in them little bags that are half full that would scare you if you understood the ingredients in them. That would scare you. A lot of the things that are made with corn and with wheat, and we wonder, I'm going to hit y'all with something right here in the middle of what nobody's going to listen to, right? How many of you have a gluten intolerance? How many of you get irritable stomach because you eat gluten? Guess what? It's not the gluten. Completely. The fact is that almost all of the commercially available high grade wheat that is used in products is genetically engineered in a way to make it more resistant to a certain pesticide. But there are options out there, and again, I can't really name the names for you. It is up to you to get your research on this one. But there are organic flours that I would almost bet money on. I don't bet money, but I would almost bet money that if you ate it, you wouldn't have those same problems. You should definitely check that out if you have a gluten intolerance issue. And that's a really hard thing to get people to listen to. It's not every wheat that's the problem. It's just every wheat that you have access to easily. The good stuff's a little bit harder to find. You can actually find, I know we can down here, and we're not a wheat state. You can find local farms that organically grow wheat that will not mess up your stomach. High protein and low protein, right? High protein's for baking bread, if you don't know. That is high gluten content. That is what it is designed to do. And it still won't mess up your stomach. All right, back to Project 2025. Overview. In 1862, President Abraham Lincoln signed into law the legislation that created the USDA. The department had a very narrow mission focused on the dissemination of information connected to agriculture and to procure, propagate, and distribute among the people new, valuable seeds and plants. During the last 160 years, the scope of the USDA's work has expanded well beyond that narrow mission and well beyond agriculture itself. In addition to being a distributor of farm subsidies, the USDA runs the food stamp program and other food-related welfare programs and covers issues including conservation, biofuels, forestry, and rural programs. Rural is a hard word for me. Based on the USDA's fiscal year 2023 budget summary, outlays are estimated at $261 billion, $221 billion for mandatory programs, and $39 billion for discretionary programs. These outlays are broken down as follows: nutrition assistance, 70%, farm, conservation, and commodity programs, 14%. All other, which includes rural development, research, food safety, marketing, and regulatory and departmental management, 11%, and forestry, 5%. The USDA has provided a summary of its size, explaining today's USDA is comprised of 29 agencies organized under 8 mission areas and 16 staff offices with nearly 100,000 employees serving the American people at more than 6,000 locations across the country and abroad. For an incoming administration, major priority issues and specific recommendations. For an incoming administration, there are numerous issues that should be addressed at the USDA. This chapter identifies and discusses many of the most important issues. The initial issues discussed should be priority issues for the next administration. Defend American agriculture. It is deeply unfortunate that the first issue identified must be a willingness of the incoming administration to defend American agriculture. But this is precisely what the top priority for the administration should be. As previously discussed, the Biden administration is seeking to use the federal government to transform the American food system, the USDA website explains. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, alongside Biden-Harris administration leadership and the people of this great country, has embarked on another historic journey, transforming the food system as we know it from farm to fork and at every stage along the supply chain. The federal government does not need to transform the food system or develop a national plan to intervene across the supply chain. Instead, it should respect American farmers, truckers, and everyone who makes the food supply chain so resilient and successful. One of the important lessons learned during the COVID-19 pandemic was how critical it is to remove barriers in the food supply chain, not to increase them. The Biden administration's centrally planned transformational effort minimizes the importance of efficient agricultural production and instead places issues such as climate change and equity front and center. The USDA's strategic plan fiscal years 2022 and 2026 identifies 6 strategic goals, the first 3 of which focus on issues such as climate change, renewable energy, and systemic racism. In the Secretary of Agriculture's message, there is only one mention of affordable food, but nothing about efficient production and the incredible innovation and respect for the environment that already exists within the agricultural community. The Biden administration's USDA strongly supported the recent United Nations Food System Summit. According to the USDA, the stated goal of the Food System Summit was to transform the way the world produces, consumes, and thinks about food within the context of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and to meet the challenges of poverty, food security, malnutrition, population growth, climate change, and natural resource degradation. Not unlike those who oppose reliable and affordable energy production, there is the disdain, especially by some on the left, for American agriculture and the food system. The Biden administration's vision of a federal government developing a plan that fixes agriculture and focuses on secondary issues to food production is very disturbing. A recent USDA-created program captures both the disrespect for American farmers and the Biden administration's effort to dictate agricultural practices. The USDA explained that it was concerned with farmers not transitioning to organic farming and therefore announced it will dedicate $300 million to induce farmers to adopt organic farming. There was no recognition that farmers know how to farm better than D.C. politicians or that organic food is expensive and land intensive. The Biden administration has also been pushing so-called climate-smart agricultural practices, which received additional support in the partisan Inflation Reduction Act. American agriculture should not need defending. According to the USDA's latest data, farm output nearly tripled, a 175% increase from 48 to 2019, while the amount of land farmed decreased. In fact, as farm output increased by 175%, all agricultural inputs increased by only 4%. In 2021, despite high food prices, a major problem and regressive, American consumers spend an average of about 10% of their personal disposable income on food, which is close to historic lows. For decades, this share has been in decline. American farmers efficiently produce food using fewer resources, making it possible for food to be affordable. This reality is not only something that should be defended, but also touted as a prime example of what makes American agriculture so successful. The connection between efficiency and affordability seems lost in the Biden administration's effort to transform the food system. And I'm glad I went on my little rant before they talked about that, because I already told you what I feel about that. We do produce a lot, right? Let's go ahead and do the transition. We produce a lot of food. We pay people not to produce food here. A lot. That is the subsidies part that they were talking about. I know people that get paid not to plant corn. I know people that get paid not to plant soybeans. I know people who get paid not to plant sweet potatoes. I know people who get paid not to farm on their farms. They hate that. But they get paid, so What are they going to do? If they don't get paid if they do grow it, they're not allowed to sell. That's a problem. It also shows you why we do not need the massive chemical production that we have now. What we have now is a tendency to go towards conglomerates because capitalism tends towards that, right? I am a capitalist. I love capitalism. I think it is the best system on the planet. I believe that it has propelled us all to greater wealth. But it does have a tendency, unchecked, to increase tyranny through corporations. The great big seed company, whose M name I can't not name, but everybody knows who I am talking about, controls something like 95% of all the seeds in the world now. One company gets to decide whether you get to plant, what you get to plant, and they sue you if their food cross contaminates yours. If you plant organic food and they get a cross contamination, they sue you. And they get to just come on your land and test it. That's due to the USDA. And that is also part of the reason why Chevron deference is a great thing that it is gone. We need to get back to smaller scale farms with less profit. I understand. Farmers do not make massive profit. Do not ever get it in your mind that they're out there raking in the money for not doing anything. Farmers work harder, longer hours than almost anybody else. That is an indisputable fact. That a 16-hour day to a farmer is normal. That is real life. 12 to 16 hours a day, every day. Not just like sometimes they take off to go to church for a couple hours, or they'll kick off in the evenings to go do something with their wife. For the most part, they are working from before sun up to after sundown, and that is just a reality of agricultural life. If they have livestock, for damn sure. But even with plants, you have to be out there taking care of things. There is all kinds of things that you have to do. So their profit margin is not that large. But if we were dealing with smaller scale, the Trump reform was scheduled to go into effect, but a D.C. District Court federal judge enjoined the rule. The USDA filed an appeal in December of 2020, but the Biden administration withdrew from defending the challenge, and the rule was never implemented. Beyond the able-bodied work requirement, FNS should implement better regulation to clarify options for states to implement the general work requirement. This requirement is an option states can apply to work-capable beneficiaries aged 16 to 59. If the beneficiary's work hours are below 30 hours a week, states can implement the general work requirements to oblige beneficiaries to register for work or participate in SNAP employment and training or workfare assigned by the state SNAP agency. Increased clarity for states would include items like states being required to offer employment and training spots for those that request them, not simply budgeting for every currently enrolled able-bodied adult. Reform broad-based categorical eligibility. Federal law permits states to enroll individuals in food stamps if they receive a benefit from another program, such as Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, TANF program. However, under an administrative option in TANF called Broad-Based Categorical Eligibility, BBCE, benefit is defined so broadly that it involves simply receiving distributed pamphlets and 1-800 numbers. This definition, with its low threshold to trigger a benefit, allows individuals to bypass eligibility limits, particularly the asset requirement, how much the applicant has in resources, such as bank accounts or property. Adopting the BBCE option has even allowed millionaires to enroll in the food stamp program. The Trump administration proposed to close the loophole with a rule to increase program integrity and reduce fraud, waste, and abuse. The regulation was not finalized before the end of the Trump administration. Reevaluate the Thrifty Food Plan. In a dramatic overreach, the Biden administration unilaterally increased food stamp benefits by at least 23% in October of 2021. through an update to the Thrifty Food Plan, in which the USDA analyzes a basket of foods intended to provide a nutritious diet. The USDA increased food stamp outlays by between 250 billion and 300 billion over 10 years. Although the 2018 Farm Bill instructed FNS to update the Thrifty Food Plan by 2023 and every 5 years thereafter, every previous Thrifty Food Plan has always been cost neutral, just an inflation update, exactly what CBO estimated as cost of the 2018 Farm Bill. The Biden administration may have skirted regulations and congressional authority to increase the overall cost of the program. In fact, Senate and House Republicans requested that the Government Accountability Office investigate the legal authorities and process that the USDA undertook to arrive at such an unprecedented increase. Eliminate the heat and eat loophole. States can artificially boost a household's food stamp benefit by using the heat and eat loophole. The amount of food stamps a household receives is based on its countable income minus certain deductions. Households that receive benefits from the Low Income Heat and Energy Assistance Program, LIHEAP, are eligible for larger utility deduction. In order to make households eligible for the higher deduction, and thus for greater food stamp benefits, states have distributed LIHEAP checks for amounts as small as $1 to food stamp recipients. The 2014 Farm Bill tightened this loophole by requiring that a household must receive more than $20 annually in LIHEAP payments to be eligible for the larger utility deduction and subsequently higher food stamp benefits. Nonetheless, states continue to inflate their standard utility allowances. Under the Trump administration, the USDA proposed a rule, which was not finalized, that would have standardized the utility allowance. Reform WIC. Turning to WIC, this program distributes money through EBT cards to help low-income women, infants, and children under 6 purchase nutrition-rich foods and nutrition education, including breastfeeding support. As of August 2022, approximately 6.3 million people participated in WIC each month to purchase food. In 2021, WIC federal outlays were $5 billion. The next administration should reform the state voucher system. State agencies control WIC costs by approving only one brand of infant formula through competitive bidding for infant formula rebate contracts. Because 50% of baby formula is purchased through the federal WIC program, it is vital that regulation for these competitive bidding contracts does not unintentionally create monopolies. Reevaluate excessive regulation. As for baby formula regulations generally, labeling regulations and regulations that unnecessarily delay the manufacture and sale of baby formula should be reevaluated. During the Biden administration, there have been devastating baby formula shortages. Return to the original purpose of school meals. Federal meal programs for K-12 students were created to provide food to children from low-income families while at school. Today, however, federal school meals increasingly resemble entitlement programs that have strayed far from their original objective and represent an example of ever expanding federal footprint in local school operations. The NSLP and SBP are the two largest K-12 meal programs provided by federal taxpayer money. The NSLP launched in 1946 and the SBP in 1966, both as options for children, specifically for children in poverty. During the pandemic, federal policymakers temporarily expanded access to school meal programs, but some lawmakers and federal officials have now proposed making this expansion permanent. Yet, even before the pandemic, research found that federal officials had already expanded these programs to serve children from upper-income homes, and these programs are rife with improper payments and inefficiencies. Heritage Foundation research from 2019 found that after the enactment of the Community Eligibility Provision, CEP, in 2010, the share of students from middle and upper income homes receiving free meals in states that participated in CEP doubled, and in some cases tripled, all in a federal program meant for children from families with incomes at or below 185% of the federal poverty line. Children from homes at or below 130% of the federal poverty line are eligible for free lunches, while students from families both at or below 185% of the poverty are eligible for reduced price lunches. Under CEP, if 40% of students in a school or school district are eligible for federal meals, all students in that school or district can receive free meals. However, the USDA has taken it even further, improperly interpreting the law to allow a subset of schools within a district to be grouped together to reach the 40% threshold. As a result, the school with zero low-income students could be grouped together with schools with high levels of low-income students, and as a result, all the students in the schools within that group, even schools without a single low-income student, can receive free federal meals. Schools can direct resources meant for students in poverty to children from wealthier families. Furthermore, the NSLP and SBP are among the most inaccurate federal programs according to paymentaccuracy.gov, a project of the U.S. Office of Management and Budget and the Office of the Inspector General. Before federal auditors reduced the rigor of annual reporting requirements in 2018, the NSLP had wasted nearly $2 billion in taxpayer resources through payments provided to ineligible recipients. Even after the auditing changes, which the U.S. Government Accountability Office said results in the USDA not regularly assessing the program's fraud risk, the NSLP wasted nearly $500 million in fiscal year 2021. The SPV now wastes nearly $200 million annually. Despite the ongoing effort to expand school meals under CEP and the evidence of waste and inefficiency, left of center members of Congress and President Biden's administration have nonetheless proposed further expansions to extend federal school meals to include every K through 12 student, regardless of need. The administration recently proposed expanding federal school meal programs offered during the school year to be offered during the summer as part of the American Families Plan, and also proposed expanding CEP. Other federal officials, including Senator Bernie Sanders, independent from Vermont, have in recent years proposed expanding the NSLP to all students. To serve students in need and prevent the misuse of taxpayer money, the next administration should focus on students in need and reject efforts to transform federal school meals into an entitlement program. Specifically, the next administration should promulgate a rule properly interpreting CEP. The USDA should issue a rule that clarifies that only an individual school or a school district as a whole, not a subset of schools within a district, must meet the 40% criteria to be eligible for CEP. Education officials should be prohibited from grouping together. Work with lawmakers to eliminate CEP. The NSLP and SEPP should be directed to serve children in need, not become an entitlement for students from middle and upper income homes. Congress should eliminate CEP. Further, the USDA should not provide meals to students during the summer unless students are taking summer school classes. Currently, students can get meals from school even if they are not in summer school, which has, in effect, turned school meals into a federal catering program. Restore programs to their original intent and reject efforts to create universal free school meals. The USDA should work with lawmakers to restore NSLP and SBP to their original goal of providing food to K through 12 students who otherwise would not have food to eat while at school. Federal school meals should be focused on children in need, and any efforts to expand student eligibility for federal school meals to include all K through 12 students should be soundly rejected. Such expansion would allow an inefficient, wasteful program to grow, magnifying the amount of wasted taxpayer resources. we're going to go ahead and take a break right here, too, because I have quite a bit to say on this particular issue. I am a conservative. I am a reluctant conservative, but I am a conservative. I am very much in the middle. I fail to find the problem in feeding children. Like, I cannot spin it in my head in a way that makes it okay to have even a single child go hungry while they're at school, for damn sure. But if we can help it at all, so be it. I have been there. I have received as a child commodities that came in a box. You got cereal in a box, you got cheese in a box. That cheese was amazing. We got peanut butter and crackers, and I was there. We used food stamps. I was there. My father was in jail. My mother was in poverty. I was there. We received free lunches. But I knew plenty of kids that didn't, and they didn't get to eat some days because they just didn't have the money. And then, on top of that, I have been there as a parent, working, paying my bills, not on substance, but getting stretched way too thin by trying to meet the meal needs of the school. And that's part of being a parent. I understand that. I am not even bitching about it. But if we can take that piece of burden, that one piece, and ensure that for at least 1 or 2 meals a day, these kids get to eat, I don't care. I really don't. I do not care if it also means that somebody who can afford doesn't have to pay. I just don't care. It makes zero fucks to me that this rich kid gets to eat and this poor kid gets to eat, and it's unfair that the rich kid doesn't have to pay. I don't care. I know that that is borderline socialism. I know. I don't care. We don't take care of our kids nearly enough. The amount of kids that are hungry, I remember, right? I remember being that way. Like now, I'm on disability Social Security. I am an injured person, if you're unaware of that. I am trying desperately to get off of Social Security. I want to be able to pay taxes. So when I tell you that I am pro-capitalism, I mean it. Like, I fully mean it, except in this case. I think that our education system should be so well funded that it is the envy of the entire world. It should be so well funded that our kids go to school and they actually learn something. That they don't have to worry about food. I am okay with them not having to worry about whether they're going to eat today. I really am. Do I think we should be giving food to the entire family for them to survive on, for everybody? No, absolutely not. But for these kids to be able to eat when they go to school, yeah, okay, give them food. I'm okay with paying that extra money. We can make it up at other places. That's probably the only governmental thing that I don't want to cut. Like, I've been there. I know exactly how fucking horrible it is. I know what it's like to have to go through a food bank and get food. You know how humiliating it is to have to go and receive charity? I can tell you. I've had to do it. Like, I'm not a functional person. I am working on changing that. But like, I have periods of time where I have to lay down and I cannot work. I tried, I can't. And so disability is the fallback for me. But if it wasn't for the fact that for the last 3 years, my kids were able, like, they've been both graduated. My son graduated last year, but from the pandemic and this expansion of the federal food, that took such a fucking weight off of us. Personally, like, we're not on food stamps. Like, I get max benefits. I worked my ass off, right? I get max disability benefits. My wife is a assistant project manager. She makes good money. Like, we do all right as far as that, but it was still a hell of a weight coming off, not having to pay for food. I can't imagine people now with inflation. You know what it's like in my pantry? Like, it's tight as Dick's hatband around here. I'm okay with feeding kids. We can find somewhere else to save money. Reform conservation programs. Farmers in general are excellent stewards of the land, if not for moral or ethical considerations, then out of self-interest. to make sure their land and by extension their livelihoods remain intact. Farmers are called the original conservationists, and I am going to take extreme exception to that. No, sir. I've talked about that before. I'm not going to hit that same hammer again, but no. Thousands upon thousands of acreage with zero life in it is not conservation. It's not. I understand we need to grow food. I know the arguments. They don't hold up. When evaluating federal conservation programs, it is important to remember the importance of the land to farmers. In terms of USDA federal conservation programs, both the USDA's Farm Service Agency and Natural Resources Conservation Service oversee numerous programs. As a general matter, the next administration should ensure that these programs address genuine and specific environmental concerns with a focus on currently existing environmental problems, not those that are speculative in nature. These conservation programs should have clearly identifiable goals, with the success or failure of these programs being directly measurable. Any assistance to farmers should take specific actions. To take specific actions should not be provided unless the assistance will directly and clearly help to address a specific environmental problem. Further, any assistance to encourage farmers to engage in certain practices should only be provided if farmers would not have adopted the practices in the first place. There are specific issues that the next administration should address. The Conservation Reserve Program, which is run by FSA, pays farmers to not farm some of their land. The program has recently received attention as agricultural groups rightfully seek to farm without penalty voluntarily idled land, in light of the consequences of food prices of Russia invading Ukraine. There is also a need to reform USDA's conservation easement. These easements are a powerful tool to incentivize long-term preservation of ecosystems while still allowing farmers to benefit economically. However, when farmers and ranchers sign conservation easements with the USDA, they can be enforced in perpetuity. Future generations, be they the descendants of the landowner or new residents, are bound by these conditions. Ecosystems and topography naturally change over time, but without legislative change, easement requirements will not. The next administration should champion the elimination of the Conservation Reserve Program. Farmers should not be paid in such a sweeping way not to farm their land. If there is the desire to ensure that extremely sensitive land is not farmed, this should be addressed through targeted efforts that are clearly connected to addressing a specific and concrete environmental harm. The USDA should work with Congress to eliminate this overbroad program. Reform NRCS wetlands and erodible land compliance and appeals. Problematic NRCS overreach could be avoided entirely by removing its authority to prescribe specific practices on a particular farm operation in order to ensure continued eligibility to participate in USDA farm programs, and to require instead that each farm, as a function of eligibility, must have created a general best practices plan. Such a plan could be approved by the local County Soil and Water Conservation District, SWCD. The local SWCD commissioners are elected by their peers in each respective county and are better suited than the NRCS to provide guidance for farm operations in their respective jurisdictions. At a minimum, a new administration should support legislation to divest more power to the states and possibly local SWCDs regarding erodible land and wetlands conservation. Reform easements. The new administration should, to the extent authorized by law, limit the permanent easements and collaborate with lawmakers to prohibit the USDA from creating new permanent easements. Other major issues and specific recommendations. Although the following issues have not been listed as a priority, These issues are still extremely important, and the next administration should address them. Only meat and poultry from federally inspected facilities can be sold in interstate commerce. Even meat and poultry from USDA approved state inspected facilities may only be sold in interstate commerce with limited exceptions. This is despite the fact that states with USDA approved inspection programs must meet and enforce requirements that are at least equal to those imposed under federal meat and poultry products inspection acts and the Humane Methods of Slaughter Act of 1978. This is an unnecessary regulatory barrier that makes it difficult to get meat and poultry into interstate commerce to create more options for consumers and farmers. Legislation entitled the New Markets for State Inspected Poultry and Meat Act of 2021 would help to remove the obstacle. The next administration should promote legislation that would allow state inspected meat to be sold in interstate commerce. These barriers to the sale of meat and poultry from USDA approved state inspected facilities should be removed. Eliminate or reform marketing orders and checkoff programs. Marketing orders and checkoff programs for agricultural commodities are similar in many ways. They both allow private actors within an industry to collaborate with the federal government to compel other competitors within an industry to fund their respective marketing order or checkoff program. There are currently 22 checkoff programs, and they focus on research and promotion of commodities such as beef and eggs. Marketing orders cover research and promotion, but also cover issues such as quality regulations and volume controls. The latter issue, volume controls, is a means to restrict supply, which drives up prices for consumers. Unfortunately, there are few active volume controls. Marketing orders and checkoff programs are some of the most egregious programs run by the USDA. They are, in effect, a tax, a means to compel speech, a government blessed cartels. Instead of getting private cooperation, they are tools for industry actors to work with government to force cooperation. The next administration should reduce the number and scope of marketing orders and checkoff programs. The USDA should reject any new requests for marketing orders and checkoff programs to the extent authorized by law and eliminate existing programs when possible. While the programs work differently, there are often petition processes and other ways that make it difficult for affected parties to get rid of the marketing orders and checkoff programs. And the USDA itself may not even be required to honor requests to terminate a program. The USDA should make the process easier. Further, the USDA should reject any effort to bring back volume controls to limit supply of commodities. Work with Congress to eliminate marketing orders and checkoff programs. These programs should be eliminated, and if industry actors want to collaborate, they should do so through private means, not using the government to compel cooperation. Promote legislation that would require regular votes. There should be regular voting for parties subject to checkoff programs and marketing orders. For example, the voting should occur at least every 5 years to determine whether a marketing order or checkoff program should continue. The USDA should be required to honor the results of such a vote. Through regular voting, parties can demonstrate their support for a marketing order or checkoff program and ensure that those administering them will be held accountable. Focus on trade policy, not trade promotion. The USDA's Foreign Agriculture Service, FAS, covers numerous issues, including trade policy, which is a reference to removing trade barriers, among other things, to ensure an environment conducive to trade. It also covers trade promotion. This includes programs like the Market Access Program that subsidizes trade associations, businesses, and other private entities to market and promote their products overseas. FAS should play a proactive and leading role to help up markets for American farmers and ranchers. There are numerous barriers such as sanitary and phytosanitary measures, blocking American agriculture products from gaining access to foreign markets. However, FAS should not help businesses and industries promote their exports, something these businesses and industries can and should do on their own. The next administration should push legislation to repeal export promotions programs. The USDA should work with Congress to repeal market development programs like the Market Access Program and similar programs. Remove obstacles for agricultural biotechnology. Innovation is critical to agricultural production and ability to meet future food needs. The next administration should embrace innovation and technology, not hinder its use, especially because of scare tactics that ignore sound science. One of the key innovations in agriculture is genetic engineering. According to the USDA, currently over 90% of U.S. corn, upland cotton, and soybeans are produced using GE, genetically engineered varieties. Despite the importance of agricultural biotechnology, in 2016, Congress passed a federal mandate to label genetically engineered food. This legislation was arguably just a means to try to provide a negative connotation to GE food. There are other challenges as well for agricultural biotechnology. For example, Mexico plans to ban the importation of U.S. genetically modified yellow corn. Yes, wholeheartedly on board with block that. We already have the capability to produce enough food to feed the entire world. We are already reaping the benefits of 90% of U.S. corn, cotton, soybeans being produced using genetically engineered means. We are already reaping the rewards of that. It is evident in our health system. I know that this is going to step on the conservative toes. That's okay. I told you I'm in the middle. This genetically engineered shit is terrible for all of us. The fact that you cannot get away from it should terrify you. 90% of U.S. corn and soybeans. You don't even realize how much soy you are consuming. Like, I live in this corn and soybean state. Corn, cotton, soybean, peanuts, sweet potatoes, and sugar cane and rice are our main agricultural products. Like, we have all the animals, but that's the main ones that we produce here in this state. And most of those have been genetically engineered and are terrible. That is an opinion. That is not a fact. That is an opinion. Genetically engineered food, and like there are two types of genetic engineering, right? There is natural selection, by which you take strong plant, breed with weaker plant, create stronger plant. That is genetic manipulation. That is genetic engineering. That is perfectly fine. There is also chemically separating the molecular makings to create a new molecular thing. That is not okay. I do not want that. I do not want a single piece of that ever in my body, and I have no choice. You can't go anywhere and not find it. I don't want that at all. I want the old school, breed it, make it better. I'm fine with that. No problems. Chemically altered, I don't want it. I want the fucking label because I don't want to buy it. Counter scare tactics and remove obstacles. Fuck you. The USDA should strongly counter scare tactics regarding agricultural biotechnology and adopt policies to remove unnecessary barriers to approvals and the adoption of biotechnology. Repeal the federal labeling mandate. The USDA should work with Congress to repeal the federal labeling law while maintaining federal preemption and stress that voluntary labeling is allowed. No. Absolutely mandatory on every single thing that is genetically modified. Use all tools available to remove improper trade barriers against agricultural biotechnology. What that means is bully our way into their food market despite the fact that they don't want this either. The USDA should work closely with the Office of the United States Trade Representative to remove improper barriers imposed by other countries to block U.S. agricultural goods. And congratulations, people. We found the tyranny. We found it. They said it was here and I didn't believe it, but damn if it's not, this is it. Remove the objections. How you're going to remove the barriers for somebody saying they don't want your garbage. That's tyranny. How are you going to do that? How are you going to pressure them? With economic means? With military means? Piss off. Reform Forest Service wildfire management. The United States Forest Service is one of 4 federal government land management agencies that administer 606 million acres, or 95% of the 640 million acres of surface land area managed by the federal government. Located within the USDA, the Forest Service manages the National Forest System, which is comprised of 193 million acres. As explained by the USDA's Forest Service's mission is to sustain the health, diversity, and productivity of the nation's forests and grasslands to meet the needs of present and future generations. The Forest Service should focus on proactive management of the forests and grasslands that does not depend heavily on burning. There should be resilient forest and grasslands in the wake of management actions. Wildfires have become a primary vegetation management regime for national forests and grasslands. Recognizing the need for vegetation management, the Forest Service has adopted pyrosilviculture using unplanned fire, such as unplanned human-caused fires, to otherwise accomplish vegetation management. The Forest Service should instead be focused on addressing the precipitous annual amassing of biomass in the national forest that drive the behavior of wildfires. By thinning trees, removing live fuels and deadwoods, and taking other preventive steps, the Forest Service can help to minimize the consequences of wildfires. Increasing timber sales could also play an important role in the effort to change the behavior of wildfire because there would be less biomass. Timber sales and timber harvested in public forests dropped precipitously in the early 1990s and still remain very low. For example, in 1988, the volume of timber sold and harvested by volume was about 11 billion and 12.6 billion board feet, BBF, respectively. In 2021, timber sold was 2.8 BBF and timber harvested was 2.4 BBF. In 2018, President Donald Trump issued Executive Order 13855 to, among other things, promote active management of forest and reduce wildfire risks. The executive order stated active management of vegetation is needed to treat these dangerous conditions on federal lands, but is often delayed due to challenges associated with regulatory analysis and current consultation requirements. It further explained the need to reduce regulatory obstacles to fuel reduction in forest created by the National Environmental Policy Act and the Endangered Species Act. The next administration should champion executive action consistent with law and proactive legislation to reduce wildfires. This would involve embracing Executive Order 13855, building upon it, and working with lawmakers to promote active management of vegetation, reduce regulatory obstacles to reducing fuel buildup and increasing timber sales. Eliminate or reform the dietary guidelines. The USDA, in collaboration with HHS, publishes the dietary guidelines every 5 years. For more than 40 years, the federal government has been releasing dietary guidelines, and during this time there has been constant controversy due to questionable recommendations and claims regarding the politicization of the process. In the 2015 Dietary Guidelines process, the influential Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee veered off mission and attempted to persuade the USDA and HHS to adopt nutritional advice that focused not just on human health, but the health of the planet. Issues such as climate change and sustainability infiltrated the process. Fortunately, the 2020 process did not get diverted in this manner. However, the dietary guidelines remained a potential tool to influence dietary choices to achieve objectives unrelated to the nutritional and dietary well being of Americans. There is no shortage of private sector dietary advice for the public, and nutrition and dietary choices are best left to individuals to address their personal needs. This includes working with their own health professionals. As it is, there is constantly changing advice provided by the government with insufficient qualifications on the advice, oversimplification to the point of miscommunicating important points, questionable use of science, and potential political influence. The dietary guidelines have a major impact. They cannot because they can not only can influence how private health providers offer nutritional advice, but they also inform federal programs. School meals are required to be consistent with the guidelines. The next administration should work with the lawmakers to repeal dietary guidelines. The USDA should help lead an effort to repeal the dietary guidelines. Minimally, the next administration should reform the dietary guidelines. The USDA, with HHS, should develop a more transparent process that properly considers the underlying science and does not overstate its findings. It should also ensure that the dietary guidelines focus on nutritional issues and do not veer off mission by focusing on unrelated issues, such as the environment, that have nothing to do with nutritional advice. In fact, if environmental concerns supersede or water down recommendations for human nutritional advice, the public would be receiving misleading health information. The USDA, working with lawmakers, should codify these reforms into law. Organizational issues. Based on recommended reforms identified as ideal solutions, the USDA would look different in many respects. One of the biggest changes would be a USDA that is not focused on welfare, given that means-tested welfare programs would be moved to HHS. The Food and Nutrition Service that administers the food and nutrition programs would be eliminated. The Farm Service Agency, which administers many of the farm subsidy programs, would be significantly smaller in size if the ideal farm subsidy reforms were adopted. Most important, a conservative USDA, as envisioned, would not be used as a government tool to transform the nation's food system, but instead would respect the importance of efficient agricultural production and ensure that the government does not hinder farmers and ranchers from producing an abundant supply of safe and affordable food. For a conservative USDA to become a reality, and for it to stay on course with the mission as outlined, the White House must strongly support these reforms and install strong USDA leaders. These individuals almost certainly will be faced with opposition from some in the agricultural community who would fight changing subsidies in any fashion, although many of the reforms would likely be embraced by those in agriculture. There would be strong opposition from environmental groups and others who want the federal government to transform American agriculture to meet their ideological objectives. Finally, there would be opposition from left of center groups that do not want to reform SNAP and would expand welfare and dependency, such as through universal free school meals, as opposed to reducing dependency. Reducing the scope of government and promoting individual freedom may not always be easy, but it is something that conservatives regularly should strive for. The listed reforms in the U.S. Department of Agriculture would help to accomplish these objectives and are well worth fighting for to achieve a freer and more prosperous nation. Conclusion. This chapter started with a discussion of the incredible success of the American farmers and American agriculture in general. This is how the chapter should close as well. Americans are blessed with an agricultural sector and a food system in general, which are worthy of incredible respect. A conservative USDA should appreciate this while recognizing that its role is to serve the interest of all Americans, not special interests, by being a champion of unleashing the potential of American agriculture. A conservative USDA would help to ensure a future with an abundant supply of safe and affordable food for individuals and families in the United States and across the globe. And so ends this section. There was a lot here that I am sure I am going to get some pushback on. There's a lot here that people will agree with, and hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to it. This is absolutely a set of complicated talks, right? This is not something that you can just sit down and know. A lot of this stuff I know because I grew up steeped in this, right? I know farmers. I know agriculture. I know people that raise cows and chickens and goats and like in bulk and all of the different agricultural processes. Like, this is an agricultural state. Louisiana is the sportsman's paradise. We are great for hunting and fishing, but there is a lot of growing of things that people eat right here. And so I am intimately involved in this. The things that I have spoken on, I feel like I was well within means of a citizen to speak upon. Not necessarily an expert in the field, but there are things absolutely as a citizen I could speak on. We do absolutely need reform in the system. There are a lot of places we can cut waste. A lot of places that they are talking about spending things, and then they're talking about cutting kids out of food. That annoys me, right? There's a lot of fights to pick. There's a lot of fights to pick on budget. That's not really one of them. There are things in here to change. There are things in here that I am absolutely terrified they'll get through. That is true. That bioengineered shit, I am not on board at all. Thankfully, I'm over halfway through my life, right? I am well past halfway of an expected life expectancy of the American male. And so I'm on the downside. Hopefully I can get through the rest of my life not having to buy that, but it's hard already. I cannot imagine how much harder it will get if they get free reign to not tell you. It is extremely easy to say the things I say. It is extremely easy to talk about change and to talk about making things different. I think that the market is going to drive it, right? I'm not out here trying to actively change things on my own as far as this. There are things that I have picked my battles and I fight those battles, but this I fight on a personal level. I very much stand by what the things I talk about. Yes, I buy chips. I do. I have other people who live here. I hate that, like, I try as much as I can to buy things that are not genetically modified other than we selected this to breed. That is perfectly fine. This chemical alteration is going to bite us worse than it already is. I don't even bite my tongue when I say that most of this gluten intolerance is because of that. The fact that we have so many people on stomach medicine, like pantoprazole, omeprazole, all of the different regulate your stomach acid medicines, it's because of this. It's because of our diet. The sooner we can recognize that and to make the necessary adjustments to that, the better off we will be. I know that there are scientific studies paid for by the people who are paying for the chemicals that say that the chemicals are perfectly fine. That doesn't mean that they are. It is better to have a naturally produced fertilizer than it is for these chemical extractions. It just is. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a very complicated topic. I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings or step on anybody's toes when I talk about these things. It is merely me expressing my opinion about this. Now, up until this point, there have been a couple of things I was like, yeah, that might be that enforcing us, pushing our unhealthy eating habits into markets that don't want them, that is tyranny. That is the tyranny that I've been looking for. I didn't expect to find it. I really didn't. I thought that this was going to be facetious all the way through. The last couple of chapters got a little bit iffy. This one is. Y'all are really calling for some wild shit with that. If you like what I'm doing here, let me know down below. Hit me with a like, share, and a sub. Throw me with a comment. If you agree with me, let me know. If you don't, let me know. Keep it civil and I won't have to block you. It is really that simple. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Take. Peace.